He thought wealth could protect his son. But when a stranger lifted him in her arms, everything he knew about care, trust, and love was about to change. The morning sun shone through the tall glass windows of the busy downtown diner, casting a warm glow over the polished tables. Inside, the chatter of customers mixed with the clatter of dishes and the hiss of coffee machines. The smell of fresh bread and sizzling bacon filled the air, making it a place that felt alive and welcoming. Amid all this activity, a small scene quietly unfolded, one that would change the course of several lives. A sleek black car pulled up outside, its paint reflecting the sunlight like a mirror. The door opened, and a tall, sharply dressed man stepped out. He moved with confidence, the kind of confidence money and power often buy. His dark suit was tailored perfectly, his shoes polished to a shine. He was a man used to attention, used to people noticing him, used to the world bending slightly in his direction. He carried himself like someone who had everything, and in many ways, he did. But as he approached the diner, his expression was calm, almost neutral, as if he was used to having everything under control. Behind him, a small boy struggled in his wheelchair, his little legs unable to help him move forward. He was about 7 years old, with bright eyes that seemed to notice everything. Despite his disability, he had a curious spirit, always looking around as if the world was a place full of wonder he wanted to touch. Today, though, he was a little anxious. The diner was bustling with people. Maneuvering the wheelchair through the crowded space was harder than usual. The man helped the boy out of the car, adjusting the blanket over his legs and checking the straps on the wheelchair. "All right, buddy," he said in a gentle tone, one that few people ever heard from him. His voice was softer than his public persona, a quiet warmth reserved only for his son. "Let's get inside." As they approached the entrance, the father's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it, his brow furrowing slightly. An urgent message from a business associate. He considered ignoring it for a moment, but decided against it, pulling it out and typing quickly. The boy, sensing his father's distraction, frowned and tried to wheel himself forward, but the doorway was narrow and crowded. He wasn't strong enough to push through on his own. That's when she appeared. A young waitress, moving with practiced speed and ease among the tables, noticed the struggle immediately. Her uniform was simple, her hair pulled back into a practical ponytail. She had the kind of eyes that seemed to take in everything, noticing not just the obvious, but the small, important details that others missed. When she saw the boy, she didn't hesitate. Without a word, she stepped forward and gently lifted him from the wheelchair, cradling him in her arms like he weighed nothing at all. The boy's eyes widened in surprise, then sparkled with delight. He felt safe, cared for, and seen. He laughed softly, a sound that warmed the father's heart, even as he continued typing on his phone. The waitress carried him through the door, weaving around diners and servers, and placed him gently at a booth near the window. "There you go," she said with a smile, patting his arm. "All set." The father looked up, finally noticing the scene. His eyes widened slightly, a mixture of surprise and admiration crossing his face. He had seen many things in his life: successes, deals, impressive displays of power, but he rarely saw pure kindness and instinctive care like this. Something about the way she moved, the way she looked at his son, without hesitation or fear, struck him deeply. It was a small act, simple and ordinary to some, but to him, it was extraordinary. The boy, still smiling, looked up at her, and then at his father. "She's nice, Dad," he said. His voice was full of sincerity, the kind only children possess. "She helped me." The father nodded, still absorbing what had just happened. He gave her a small, grateful nod, a silent acknowledgement of her kindness. She nodded back, understanding that no words were necessary. Sometimes, actions spoke louder than anything else. As the boy settled into the booth, the waitress leaned down slightly to make sure he was comfortable. She asked if he wanted a menu, and when he shook his head, she smiled and promised to bring his favorite drink. The father watched, feeling a strange mix of emotions. There was pride in his son for being so brave, relief that someone had been so compassionate, and a stirring curiosity about the young woman who had stepped into their lives so naturally. The diner continued to buzz around them. People laughed, servers called out orders, and the coffee machines steamed loudly. But in that small corner near the window, a quiet connection had formed. The father's eyes kept returning to her, noticing small things. The way she adjusted the blanket over his son's legs, the gentle tone she used when speaking to him, the patience in her every movement. She treated him like he was important, like he mattered not because of who his father was, not because of money or status, but because she genuinely cared for the father, who had spent much of his life surrounded by people who were often interested in him for his wealth or influence. This was unfamiliar and strangely moving. He realized that he had never truly seen someone act with such genuine empathy before. It was a reminder of something he had long forgotten: the value of simple human kindness, of being fully present for another person without expecting anything in return. The boy reached for his drink, giggling as the waitress set it down carefully on the table. "Thank you," he said, his voice full of warmth. She smiled, ruffling his hair gently. "You're welcome, kiddo. You take care of yourself, okay?" The father's heart swelled with a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. Watching his son laugh and interact with someone who treated him with genuine care, he felt a softening inside him. In that moment, he realized that life was not just about deals, profits, or status. It was about people, connections, and the moments of pure humanity that could touch the heart in ways no money ever could. As they sat together, the waitress continued her work, moving gracefully among the tables, but always keeping an eye on the boy, checking to make sure he had everything he needed. The father found himself stealing glances at her, curious about her life, her character, the way she could make such a small act feel so monumental. He felt a pull, a desire to know more about her, but he also hesitated. Their worlds were so different, his life filled with luxury and influence, hers with hard work and modest means. Could someone like her ever truly connect with someone like him? Still, he couldn't deny the impression she had made. It was rare to meet someone who acted from the heart without calculation, someone who could touch the lives of others in a way that felt effortless yet powerful. And watching her with his son, he realized that this small act of carrying a child across a crowded diner had revealed something about her that was far more valuable than wealth, looks, or charm. Revealed character. The boy continued to smile, talking animatedly about his favorite toys and school stories. The waitress listened, laughing softly, and the father observed quietly, feeling something shift inside him. It was a gentle shift, almost imperceptible. But it was there a change in perspective, a softening of the edges that life had built around him. He realized that moments like this, simple and human, mattered more than any boardroom victory or financial gain. As the meal continued, the father put away his phone and focused on the two of them. He watched the interaction between his son and the waitress, noticing the comfort and trust that had developed so quickly. It struck him that while he could provide money, opportunities, and protection, what his son had just received was something far more profound: genuine care, attention, and empathy. It was a lesson he hadn't realized he needed to learn himself. By the time they left the diner, the father felt a quiet gratitude. He left behind a tip, generous in size, but even more significant was the unspoken acknowledgement he carried with him. He had witnessed something rare and beautiful, a reminder of the simple human connections that could shift perspectives and touch hearts. And as he pushed his son toward the sleek car waiting outside, he knew that today had changed something in him. Something subtle but enduring. It was a small encounter in a busy diner. Almost ordinary in its setting, but extraordinary in its impact. The kindness of a young waitress, the laughter of a child, and the quiet observations of a father created a moment that would linger in their lives, setting the stage for changes and connections that none of them could yet fully imagine. After that morning at the diner, the father couldn't stop thinking about the young waitress. She had carried his son with such gentle strength, treating him like he was someone truly important. It was a small act, but it had left a deep impression on him. All day, as he sat in his office surrounded by the constant hum of phones, computers, and meetings, her image kept surfacing in his mind. He remembered the way she had smiled at his son, the careful way she had adjusted the blanket over his legs, and the warmth in her voice. None of his wealth, his boardroom victories, or the accolades he had collected over the years had made him feel the way watching her care for his son did. The boy, too, talked about her constantly. On the drive home, he asked his father if they could go back to the diner soon. "I like her, Dad," he said, his small hand gripping the armrest of the car. "She's nice. She helped me. Can we see her again?" The father, who had been preoccupied with business plans and schedules, felt a shift inside. Seeing his son's joy, the sparkle in his eyes, reminded him of the simple happiness life could offer. He realized that sometimes the smallest gestures left the biggest marks. A few days later, the father decided to take a different route during lunch. He found himself back at the diner, almost by instinct. He told himself it was just for convenience, that it was easier than finding another place to eat. But deep down, he knew he wanted to see her again. When he walked in, the waitress recognized him immediately. Her eyes flickered with a mix of recognition and professional caution. She had seen many people come and go, some wealthy, some famous, some kind, and some indifferent. But there was something about him, something different this time. He smiled at her, a simple, genuine smile that seemed to bridge the gap between their worlds. "Good afternoon," he said, trying to sound casual, though his heart was beating a little faster than usual. She returned the greeting with a polite nod. And then, as if nothing had changed, she continued her work. Taking orders and moving through the crowded diner with ease, the father took a seat near the corner, close enough to watch her but far enough to give them both space. He noticed little things that others might miss. The way she balanced plates effortlessly. The way she spoke kindly to the elderly customers. The way she remembered regulars' orders without needing to check a list. It wasn't just her skill that impressed him. It was her character. She moved with grace, patience, a quiet strength that seemed almost unspoken. As she approached his table, he noticed her glance toward his son, who had insisted on coming along again. The boy's face lit up when he saw her. "Hi," he said, waving excitedly. The waitress knelt slightly to meet his eyes. "Hey there. How are you today?" she asked warmly. The boy giggled and told her about his day at school, the small adventures he had, and the games he had played. She listened carefully, laughing at the funny parts, asking gentle questions about the hard ones, giving him her full attention. The father watched quietly, a strange feeling settling in his chest. He realized that what had struck him so much before was not just her kindness, but the way she made people feel seen. She didn't just do her job. She connected. She didn't just serve drinks and meals. She touched lives. And in that small diner, in the middle of the bustling crowd, he saw the world through a different lens, a world where small, meaningful acts mattered more than anything else. Over the next few weeks, he found himself returning more often. He told himself it was by chance, that the diner was convenient and the food good. But in truth, he was drawn by the quiet strength of the waitress, by the way she treated his son with genuine care. Each time he came, he observed a little more, noticing the subtle ways she made people feel comfortable. The small gestures that spoke volumes about her character. The boy's bond with her grew naturally. He would tell her jokes, ask her questions, and sometimes, without any prompting, reach out for her hand or hug her briefly. She always responded with warmth, making him feel safe and special. The father watched these interactions with a mix of awe and gratitude. He realized that she was offering something far beyond her role as a waitress. She was offering attention, kindness, and respect. Qualities that even he, with all his wealth, could not buy. One afternoon, while the diner was crowded, a commotion broke out at a neighboring table. A customer had accidentally spilled coffee, and the other people around started to argue. The waitress didn't hesitate. She moved quickly, calming both sides with a calm and firm tone, diffusing the situation before it escalated. The father watched, impressed by her composure. She had a way of handling difficult moments gracefully, of seeing the problem and fixing it without causing more conflict. The father began to realize something important. This woman was not just kind, she was strong. She was capable of handling challenges, of seeing the needs of others, and of taking action when necessary. Her strength was quiet, unassuming, and entirely genuine. He had spent years surrounded by people who acted powerful, but often lacked real character. Here was someone whose power was measured not by wealth or status, but by empathy, courage, and heart. He began to talk to her occasionally, small conversations that grew longer over time. He asked about her day, about her favorite meals to prepare, and sometimes about her life outside the diner. She answered honestly, with humor and humility, never hiding who she was, never pretending to be someone she was not. He found himself drawn to her authenticity, to the way she could be herself even in the presence of someone so different from her world. She, on the other hand, noticed his curiosity. She saw him watching, listening, and trying to understand her. She noticed the quiet way he treated her son, the patience he showed, and the effort he made to connect beyond appearances. But she also felt cautious. People like him often lived in a world so far removed from hers that genuine connection seemed impossible. She wondered if his attention was real, or if it was just another display of wealth and charm. Yet, there was something in his eyes, something in the way he interacted with her son, made her feel it might be different this time. The father began to reflect on his own life. Watching her care for his son made him think about the moments he had missed, the times he had been too busy with work to truly connect. He realized that his son's happiness mattered more than any deal or business success. He saw that the small, compassionate acts of this waitress had opened his eyes to what truly mattered: love, care, and genuine human connection. One afternoon, as the boy laughed at a story the waitress told, the father reached out and quietly thanked her. "I don't know how to say this," he admitted, "but thank you. For him, for this, for everything." She smiled gently, shrugging modestly. "It's nothing special," she said, though her eyes showed that she understood the weight of his gratitude. "I just do what I can." But he knew it was not nothing. It was everything. As weeks turned into months, a rhythm developed. They would visit the diner. They would talk, laugh, and share small moments. The boy thrived in her presence, more confident, happier, and more willing to explore the world around him. The father, in turn, began to see life differently. He learned to slow down, to appreciate the little moments, and to understand that kindness could be more powerful than wealth, more lasting than fame, and more meaningful than any achievement. Their lives began to shift in ways that were subtle but profound. The diner, once just a place to grab a meal, became a place of connection, learning, and quiet transformation. And all of it began with a simple act: a young waitress carrying a small boy across a crowded floor, treating him with care, and reminding a father of the value of true empathy. The father realized that he had witnessed something rare, something that could not be bought, taught, or forced. It was genuine, unassuming goodness, and it had opened his eyes to a world beyond boardrooms, contracts, and money. It had shown him that real wealth came from the heart, from compassion, and from the small, meaningful connections that define a life. And in that realization, something in him shifted. He began to see that this was just the beginning, that life could be fuller, richer, and more meaningful if he allowed himself to embrace these moments. He began to wonder what other lessons awaited him, what other ways he could grow, and how far this unexpected connection might take him, his son, and the young woman who had already changed so much without even trying. As weeks passed, the father found himself returning to the diner more often. He told himself it was for convenience, that the food was good and the atmosphere easy for his son, but deep down, he knew the real reason. He wanted to see the waitress again, to watch how she interacted with his son, and to observe the quiet strength she carried in every movement. Every time he walked in, he felt a strange mix of anticipation and curiosity, as if something new was about to unfold. The waitress, meanwhile, had started to notice him more clearly. She wasn't unkind, but she was cautious. She had seen many people like him before, wealthy, powerful, and often disconnected from the real struggles of life. Many had smiled, said polite words, and even been generous, but few had truly looked at her or at her son with genuine interest. Yet there was something different about this man. He wasn't merely observing her as a spectacle or a source of charm. He was noticing her actions, her care, and her dedication. The boy, of course, adored her. Every time they entered the diner, his face lit up with excitement. He ran, or tried to run, toward her, his small hands reaching out. "Hi," he shouted, laughing before she even had a chance to greet him. She knelt down to meet his gaze, smiling warmly. "Hey there. How was your day?" she asked. He babbled on about his school, his small adventures, and even the stories of his imaginary friends. She listened with full attention, asking gentle questions and laughing at the funny parts. She treated him as though every word mattered, every detail was important, and every story deserved acknowledgement. The father watched quietly from his table, observing their interactions. He noticed the subtle ways she responded to his son, the way she adjusted his blanket, the way she encouraged him to speak up, the way she made him feel heard. He realized that this bond she was forming with his child was rare. Not many people could connect so deeply and naturally with someone so young and differently abled. Her patience, her attentiveness, and her warmth struck him profoundly. Over time, he began to talk to her more directly. At first, it was small talk questions about the menu, the weather, or her day at work. She responded politely, keeping her words simple, but there was a growing sense of curiosity on both sides. She noticed that he wasn't asking questions to impress her or to flaunt his wealth. He genuinely wanted to know her, to understand her world, and to connect in a meaningful way. One day, as the diner quieted down after the lunch rush, he asked about her life outside of work. "Do you live around here?" he asked, trying to sound casual. She hesitated for a moment, but then smiled. "Yes, not too far. Just enough to walk sometimes if I feel like it." Her words were simple, but there was honesty in them. She didn't boast, didn't exaggerate, didn't try to make her life seem more glamorous than it was. It was real, and he found that refreshing. Their conversations began to stretch a little longer each visit. They talked about simple things: favorite books, favorite movies, small dreams she held quietly, and childhood memories. He listened intently, fascinated by her resilience, her humor, and her perspective on life. She, in turn, began to notice his quiet moments of vulnerability. He was a man of power, yes, but in these conversations, away from meetings and boardrooms, he revealed a different side that cared deeply for his son, that respected kindness, and that was willing to reflect on his own life. The boy thrived in this environment. He began looking forward to these visits with excitement that made the father smile. He laughed more, spoke more, and even tried to imitate some of the waitress's gestures and jokes. Watching this, the father realized how deeply she had influenced his son already. The girl's warmth and care had created a safe space where the boy could express himself freely, and he began to see how valuable such human connection truly was. One afternoon, while the diner was busy with the lunchtime rush, a small accident occurred. A chair tipped over, and a tray of drinks fell near the boy's booth. The waitress reacted immediately, moving with speed and precision, catching the tray just before it spilled on him. She steadied the boy, making sure he was okay, and smiled at him with reassurance. The father's eyes widened as he watched her handle the situation with calm confidence. She wasn't just kind. She was capable and quick thinking, able to manage unexpected events without panic. After the rush settled, the father spoke to her quietly. "That was impressive," he said, his voice low but sincere. She shrugged modestly, as if it were nothing special. "Just part of the job," she replied, but he could see the pride in her eyes. It wasn't about showing off. It was about doing the right thing, quietly and effectively. Their connection continued to deepen. Sometimes, the father would find himself lingering after his meal, just watching her interact with others, noticing the patience she showed to difficult customers and the way she treated every person with respect. He began to reflect on his own life and the way he often rushed through interactions, focused on results rather than relationships. Watching her, he realized that character and kindness mattered far more than status or power. She, too, began to see him differently. She noticed that he wasn't just a wealthy man visiting the diner for convenience. He genuinely cared for his son and seemed to value her opinion and her perspective. At first, she was cautious. People from his world often had hidden motives, but over time, She began to trust his sincerity. She realized that he respected her for who she was, not for what she could do for him one day. As they sat together with the boy giggling at a story she told, the father said something quietly, almost to himself. "I don't know how to thank you for what you do for him." She looked at him and smiled softly. "You don't need to thank me. He's a wonderful kid. I just try to make sure he feels safe and happy." But he could see the truth in her words. She didn't do it for recognition or reward. She did it because she cared, simply and completely. The father began to notice that his own life was changing. He found himself slowing down, paying more attention to small moments, and valuing kindness and empathy in ways he hadn't before. He realized that watching her interact with his son had taught him more about life than any of his business deals or accomplishments ever had. It was a lesson in patience, humility, and the quiet power of human connection. The boy, sensing the growing bond between them, began to include her in his small world. He would tell her secrets, ask her for advice, and sometimes just sit quietly, enjoying her company. She treated each moment with respect, never dismissing his words or feelings. The father watched these interactions and felt a mix of gratitude and admiration. He understood that her influence on his son was profound, shaping him in ways that would stay with him for years to come as their visits continued. The father and the waitress began to develop a kind of silent understanding. They didn't need to speak constantly to communicate. Gestures, expressions, and small acts of care were enough. He would notice her checking to make sure the boy was comfortable, adjusting the chair or blanket, and she would notice him quietly observing, offering support when needed. This unspoken connection built trust and respect between them. Bridging the gap between their very different worlds, the father also began to notice the subtle ways the waitress inspired him. Her integrity, her courage, and her ability to care deeply, without expecting anything in return, challenged him to be better. He reflected on his own actions, realizing that while he had wealth and influence, he sometimes lacked the emotional depth and understanding that truly meaningful relationships required. Watching her, he learned the importance of presence, empathy, and genuine care. One afternoon, after the diner had quieted, he spoke to her more openly. "I've been thinking," he said, choosing his words carefully, "about how much this has changed for me. For him, seeing you care so naturally. I don't know why it's had such an impact, but it has." She looked at him, her eyes calm and thoughtful. "Sometimes people just need someone to notice them," she replied softly. "That's all it takes." Her words stayed with him. He realized that noticing, caring, and being present were more valuable than anything he had ever pursued in life. He understood that his son's happiness, his own growth, and the possibility of genuine connection all depended on small, meaningful acts, not wealth or status. The boy, meanwhile, laughed and played, unaware of the lessons unfolding around him, but thriving because of them. His happiness and comfort became a bridge between his father and the waitress, creating a shared space where trust and affection could grow. They had started as strangers, but over time, they had become a quiet team, connected by empathy and care. By the time they left the diner that day, the father felt a sense of calm he hadn't known in years. Watching his son flourish, watching the waitress interact with him, and reflecting on the subtle changes in himself, he realized that this connection was rare and precious. It wasn't just about gratitude or admiration. It was about understanding the value of human kindness and the transformative power of attention and care. And so, life began to shift, slowly but surely. The diner visits became a ritual. The bond between the boy and the waitress deepened, and the father's perspective continued to expand. Each small interaction, each act of care, each shared smile contributed to a growing sense of trust, respect, and connection, a foundation that promised more changes and meaningful developments in the days to come. Over time, the bond between the father, his son, and the waitress had grown stronger. But life, as it often does, had a way of complicating even the simplest connections. The father had started visiting the diner regularly, no longer pretending it was by chance. He was genuinely drawn to her kindness, her patience, and the way she treated his son with genuine care. He admired her more than he had expected, and he found himself thinking about her even when he was in the high-rise office, surrounded by the noise of business deals, contracts, and constant decision-making. The waitress, too, had grown more comfortable with him. She had noticed the genuine interest he had in her life and the care he showed for his son. Still, she was cautious. She had learned from life not to trust appearances too quickly, and people from his world often had complicated motives. Some sought admiration, some sought control, and some simply enjoyed the thrill of attention. She worried about what his intentions might be, and yet she could not deny the warmth and sincerity she had seen in him over time. The boy, oblivious to adult concerns, thrived in their growing connection. He laughed freely, spoke openly, and sometimes even tried to help the waitress with small tasks around the diner. He felt safe, valued, and happy in her presence. It was clear to anyone watching that he had developed a special attachment to her. The father observed these interactions quietly, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and pride. He knew that she had brought something into their lives that money or privilege could never provide. It's a true human connection. But with this deepening bond came tension. Rumors started to surface. Colleagues and friends of the father began to notice his frequent visits to the diner and his attention toward the waitress. Some of them whispered about the situation behind closed doors, questioning why a man of his wealth and influence would spend so much time with someone from such a modest background. There were insinuations, subtle and not so subtle, about whether he was trying to charm her or whether the relationship could ever be genuine. The waitress eventually heard hints of these whispers. She felt a wave of unease, unsure of what to think. She had already been cautious, and now the doubt planted by outside opinions made her wary. She did not want to be seen as someone taking advantage of the father's wealth, and she did not want his attention to feel like an obligation or a performance. Her instincts told her to step back, to protect herself from potential disappointment or misunderstanding. One day, as the diner buzzed with the lunchtime crowd, a minor emergency arose. The boy accidentally dropped his drink, and the spill threatened to soak his school books. The waitress reacted instantly. She scooped the books from the floor, wiped the spill, and comforted the boy with her gentle, reassuring words. The father, watching from a nearby table, realized in that moment that her courage and quick thinking were not limited to small acts of care. They extended to moments of stress, unpredictability, and challenge. Her presence made him feel secure for the first time in a long while. This small emergency also became a turning point for understanding. The father saw how her strength, compassion, and quick action had a direct impact on his son's safety and happiness. He realized that his admiration for her was not just about her kindness, but also about her ability to navigate difficult situations with grace. She could handle challenges with calm confidence, and this quality was rare. Even among the people he had met in his high-powered world, despite these positive moments, tension lingered. The whispers from outside, combined with her own cautious instincts, created a subtle barrier between them. She began to question whether his visits were motivated by genuine care or if they were influenced by curiosity, fascination, or social expectations. She valued her independence and did not want to feel pressured into accepting attention she might not fully trust. The father, on the other hand, struggled to bridge this growing distance. He wanted to show her his intentions were sincere, but he also understood that words alone would not suffice. He had to demonstrate it through consistent action and respect. One afternoon, during a quieter moment in the diner, he spoke to her directly. "I know people talk," he said softly, "and I can't control what they say. But I want you to know that I come here because of how you care for him, for my son, and because of how genuine you are. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less." She looked at him, reading the honesty in his expression. For the first time, she felt a slight easing of her doubts. It was rare to hear someone speak so openly, without hidden motives or exaggerated flattery. The boy, sensing the tension between the adults, tried to lighten the mood. He giggled, telling a funny story about a playground mishap, and the waitress laughed, her eyes softening as she listened. The father smiled too, realizing that his son's presence was the bridge between them. Apps. the common ground that reminded them both why they were there. The boy's happiness became a shared priority, an anchor in a situation complicated by uncertainty and social judgment. Despite this, life outside the diner continued to complicate matters. The father's colleagues would make remarks, sometimes casual, sometimes pointed, about his frequent visits and the noticeable attention he paid to the waitress. They questioned whether she was capable of handling such a unique situation, whether she could navigate the challenges of being connected to someone of his wealth and influence, and whether their worlds were too different to ever truly align. These doubts, though mostly spoken in whispers, added weight to the waitress's own cautious thoughts. She began to reflect on her own feelings, torn between appreciation for his sincerity and the fear of being misunderstood. She had always valued her independence and had worked hard to build a life based on her own choices. Being drawn into the orbit of a wealthy man, however kind, required her to navigate new complexities. Could she trust that his interest was genuine? Could she accept the attention without losing herself in the process? These questions swirled in her mind as she continued to care for the boy, maintaining her professionalism while protecting her heart. The father, meanwhile, felt the growing tension acutely. He realized that admiration and care alone were not enough. He had to earn her trust and respect consistently. His previous life, filled with status and power, had rarely required such patience, humility, and understanding. But now, he was learning that the most meaningful connections were built not on wealth, influence, or charm, but on honesty, empathy, and reliability. Every visit, every small act of consideration became part of this unspoken effort to show her that he valued her for who she truly was. Then, one day, the diner faced a slightly larger challenge. A customer slipped near the entrance, and the scene became chaotic for a brief moment. The waitress immediately took charge, helping the person safely, calming nearby patrons, and ensuring the boy remained secure. The father watched, his admiration deepening. Her actions were not about recognition. She acted out of instinct, courage, and compassion. She managed to turn a potentially frightening situation into one of order and reassurance. After the incident, he approached her and said quietly, "I see why you matter so much. Not just to him, but to everyone around you. You have a strength I've rarely seen before." She looked at him with a mixture of humility and surprise. She didn't expect such words from him, nor did she fully realize the impression she had made. But in that moment, she began to feel a tentative trust forming, recognition that his intentions were genuine. Even if her doubts still lingered, their relationship continued to evolve in subtle ways. The father made an effort to be patient, to allow her to maintain her boundaries, and to show through actions rather than words that his care was sincere. The waitress, while cautious, gradually allowed herself to notice the differences in him: the quiet attentiveness, the respect for her independence, and the genuine concern for her well-being and his son's happiness. Meanwhile, the boy remained the central bond that connected them all. His laughter, trust, and openness reminded both adults of the importance of empathy, care, and shared moments. Through him, the father and the waitress began to understand that despite differences in wealth, background, or life experience, their shared humanity created a space for trust and connection. By the end of this period, both the father and the waitress had learned important lessons. He had learned that genuine connection required patience, humility, and understanding beyond wealth or status. She had learned that not all attention from the wealthy was superficial or self-serving, and that kindness, consistency, and respect could bridge even the widest gaps between different worlds. Yet, the tension remained, a delicate undercurrent beneath their interactions. It was a reminder that trust had to be earned, that understanding had to be nurtured, and that the journey from admiration to true connection required care, courage, and patience. Both of them sensed that the most important challenges were not yet behind them. The whispers, the doubts, and the uncertainties were part of a larger test, one that would determine whether their bond could grow into something meaningful and lasting. And through it all, the boy continued to thrive, his joy and innocence acting as a constant reminder of what truly mattered. He remained the heart of their connection, the reason they both persisted through the doubts and complications, and the catalyst for the growing understanding and respect between the father and the waitress. The days grew warmer as spring settled into the city, and with the change in seasons came a sense of quiet transformation. The father found himself reflecting on everything that had happened over the past months. He had come to the diner initially for convenience, then curiosity, and now he realized he came because he wanted to be part of something meaningful. The small, simple acts of care the waitress had shown to his son had shifted his perspective in ways he had never expected. He had started to understand that life was not just about success, money, or influence, but about connection, empathy, and the courage to care for others without expectation. The waitress, too, had begun to see him differently. Her cautiousness had not disappeared entirely, but it had softened. She had watched him not only with his son but with others, noticing how patient he could be, how he listened when people spoke, and how he treated his son's happiness as the highest priority. She realized that he had grown over time, learning lessons about patience and empathy that his wealth and status had never taught him. She began to sense that this man, who at first seemed distant and preoccupied, was capable of sincerity and genuine affection. The boy continued to be the bridge between them. He laughed and played freely, his small hands reaching for the waitress as he told her about his day, his hopes, and even his fears. He had learned to trust her, to feel safe in her presence, and to enjoy the small moments that made life bright. He would sometimes glance at his father, noticing the quiet satisfaction in his eyes, and knew that something special was unfolding. Though he did not fully understand the complexities of adult relationships. One afternoon, the diner was quiet, and the three of them sat together at a corner booth. The father watched the waitress gently help his son with his homework, patiently explaining a small math problem and encouraging him to try again when he struggled. The boy giggled when he finally got it right, and the waitress clapped her hands softly, celebrating his success. The father felt a deep swell of gratitude. He realized that her presence in their lives had created not only joy, but also a sense of stability and care that could not be measured in money or influence. It was in moments like these that the father's understanding deepened. He had spent years surrounded by people who valued him for his wealth, power, and achievements. But here, in this small diner, watching a young woman care for his child, he understood what true value meant. It was measured not by what one could acquire, but by what one gave, how one treated others, and the impact one had on the lives of those around them. The waitress, for her part, had begun to let go of her lingering doubts. She had seen his consistency, his patience, and his genuine care, and it had started to erode the walls she had built around herself. She realized that his attention was not about wealth or influence, but about connection and respect. Slowly, she allowed herself to trust him, to see that he was capable of understanding her world and valuing her for who she truly was. Over time, the father also recognized that his feelings had grown beyond admiration and gratitude. He found himself thinking about her when he was away, noticing the absence of her presence in his otherwise busy days. He began to appreciate the subtle ways she had shaped his son's life and indirectly his own. Her compassion, courage, and patience had become a mirror reflecting the qualities he aspired to embody: gentleness, empathy, and genuine care. One day, the father decided to express his feelings, not through grand gestures or gifts, but through honest words. As they sat together in the diner, he looked at the waitress and said softly, "I don't think I could have imagined how much your presence would change us, him, me, everything. You've brought so much into our lives, more than I ever expected. I just want you to know that I see you, I respect you. I value you not for anything else, just for who you are." The waitress felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had heard similar words in the past, but never with such sincerity. She could see that he meant every word, that it was not a fleeting compliment or an attempt to impress, but a reflection of genuine respect and appreciation. She smiled, quietly moved, for the first time allowed herself to fully accept the depth of his intentions. From that day forward, the relationship began to shift in a natural, unforced way. They spent more time together outside of the diner, going on simple walks with the boy, sharing meals and talking about life, hopes, and dreams. Their connection was built on trust, mutual respect, and shared experiences rather than wealth, status, or appearances. The father found joy in these small moments. Learning to appreciate life's subtleties and to value the emotional wealth that kindness and empathy created, the boy, of course, was delighted by the closeness. He would run ahead during walks, holding the waitress's hand, telling jokes, and asking questions. He had never felt so secure, so happy, and so loved. Watching him thrive in her presence, the father realized that this bond was not just about adults, it was about creating a nurturing environment where the child could grow with confidence and joy. The impact of her kindness was visible in every smile, every laugh, and every playful gesture of the boy. The father also began to make changes in his own life. He started to slow down, to prioritize meaningful interactions over endless meetings and business obligations. He realized that true happiness did not come from money or power, but from being present, caring for others, and fostering genuine connections. The waitress, by simply being herself, had taught him lessons that no business mentor or advisor ever could. Her influence extended beyond the diner, shaping his approach to life, family, and relationships. There were challenges, of course. Their worlds were still different, and navigating social expectations required care. But both the father and the waitress had learned the importance of patience, understanding, and communication. They knew that trust had to be nurtured, and that genuine connection required time, effort, and mutual respect. Their differences, rather than being a barrier, became a point of growth, an opportunity to learn from one another, and to build something meaningful together. One afternoon, as they walked through a nearby park, the father watched the boy chase butterflies and laugh freely. The waitress walked beside him, her hand brushing against his lightly, a gesture of comfort and support. He realized in that quiet moment that life had shifted for all of them. They were no longer just strangers who had met by chance in a diner. They were a small family, connected by care, respect, and shared experiences. The bond they had formed was genuine, deep, and enduring. The father felt a sense of gratitude he had rarely experienced before. He had witnessed the power of kindness, the impact of empathy, and the joy that comes from being fully present in the lives of others. The waitress, too, felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her actions, motivated by care and compassion, had helped shape not only the boy's life, but also the father's perspective on what truly mattered. Together, they began to plan small moments of joy, weekend trips to the park, quiet afternoons at the library, and shared dinners that were filled with laughter, stories, and connection. The father learned to appreciate the beauty and simplicity, and the waitress discovered that trust and mutual respect could bridge even the widest gaps between two very different worlds. The boy thrived in this nurturing environment, his happiness serving as a constant reminder of the value of care, patience, and genuine human connection. By the end of this period, the father had undergone a quiet transformation. He had learned that true wealth was measured not in money or possessions, but in love, empathy, and the strength of human bonds. The waitress had taught him, without intending to, that kindness and authenticity could change lives. Their shared experiences had created a foundation of trust, respect, and mutual admiration that promised a future filled with warmth, understanding, and meaningful connection. And so, as the sun set over the city one evening, the three of them sat together at the diner, the boy laughing over a small joke, the waitress smiling warmly, and the father quietly reflecting on how far they had come. What began as a simple act of care, lifting a small boy across a crowded diner floor, had grown into a bond that reshaped their lives, teaching them about empathy, trust, and the true meaning of family. In that quiet moment, the father realized something profound. Life was not about the accumulation of wealth or power, but about moments like these: shared laughter, genuine care, and the courage to open one's heart to others. He understood that the greatest gifts in life could not be bought, only nurtured through kindness, patience, and love. The waitress had given them far more than they could ever repay. She had given them connection, trust, and the possibility of joy in its purest form. The story of their lives had shifted completely. The diner, once just a place to grab a meal, had become a sanctuary of growth, understanding, and shared humanity. The father had learned to slow down and appreciate the small, meaningful moments. The waitress had learned to trust and embrace the possibility of connection. And the boy, the heart of it all, had learned that the world could be filled with care, kindness, and love. And in that quiet, transformative space, they had found something rare and beautiful, a bond that transcended wealth, background, and circumstance, built entirely on the enduring power of empathy, courage, and human connection.